Senators in the United States are voting on whether or not to extend the African Growth and Opportunity Act for another 10 years. But are the changes proposed in the bill that are being voted on actually in the last hour the ones that African economies really need? Or is this just a case of kicking the can down the road? We'll be answering that question live from Washington in the next 30 minutes. Welcome to Global Business. Here's what's coming up. 2 months after Kenya shut down Somali cash remittance accounts, we'll be exploring the effect this has had on businesses. And for 7 decades, Legos have entertained children and adults alike. Now they're key to South African art as well. Now, a bipartisan bill to renew the African Growth and Opportunity Act, AGOA, for another decade is before the American Congress. The current version of AGOA is due to expire the 30th of September unless renewal legislation is approved before then. Now, the scheme is considered to be a cornerstone of the U.S.-African economic relationship. It's providing approximately 6,000 products from sub-Saharan Africa with preferential, quota-free, duty-free access to the U.S. economy. AGOA expands upon the U.S. Generalized System of Preferences, GSP, which allows developed countries to offer developing countries preferential treatment on specific goods and services. Now, Kate Fisher is live in Washington with more data on this story. Kate, the American senators, of course, were voting on this particular bill. What's the latest? And after this vote, what happens next?
Well, they've just finished doing that on Capitol Hill here in Washington, D.C. And I can tell you that the AGOA renewal has passed by 97 votes for it, just 1 against it. So a pretty authoritative yes to a renewal of AGOA for 10 years at the American Senate. It will now go to the House of Representatives, but we don't expect there to be any problem with it passing through there as well. So we could see within a matter of weeks or months this being made into law.
Indeed. South Africa, of course, is one of the biggest beneficiaries of AGOA in terms of trade volume between it and the United States. But there are several aspects of the bill which specifically target South Africa. What are these measures and what effect will they have on trade flows between the two countries?
Yes, many of the amendments made in this bill do target South Africa. There have been many negotiations in the run-up to this vote about South Africa's part in AGOA. Specifically, one of the main clauses that affects them says that as soon as this bill is made law in the US, it will trigger an out-of-cycle review on South Africa's involvement in AGOA. So as soon as it's made into law, there will be a 30-day window, and inside that 30 days, there will be a whole-scale review of South Africa's membership. And we expect, having spoken to a trade lawyer who specialises in this kind of thing, he believes that within 60 to 90 days of that, there will be a completed review, and that will really decide whether South Africa remains part of AGOA or whether its terms and its terms of membership have to be modified in some way. So it will be an immediate process.
Indeed. Given the fact that AGOA imports comprise essentially less than 1% of total U.S. imports, what's really driving this need for reciprocal treatment with countries like South Africa? Is this perhaps partly influenced by the economic partnership agreements the EU has been signing with African countries?
Yes, certainly. I think there's a lot of dismay here in Washington that they see many European countries getting a free ride, if you like, getting preferential trading arrangements with African countries, whereas AGOA is non-reciprocal. American exporters don't get any advantage from it. It's all for the African countries that get the advantages. And certainly with respect to South Africa, there are questions about, perhaps it's a more advanced economy, and actually this is supposedly a development-led policy in the US. Perhaps South Africa actually doesn't need it anymore and is advanced enough to manage on its own without this help from America. So there's all these conversations going on as well, and certainly many of the lawmakers do think that it's time that South Africa's relationship with AGOA was modified, and that is part of the reason why there is this clause in the new act saying that in fact there will have to be fresh negotiations with South Africa about the part they play, and perhaps a slightly different arrangement with them to the rest of the sub-Saharan African countries involved.
Indeed. One last question for you, Kate. Some African policymakers have also been pushing for an expansion of the amount of products that qualify for AGOA access, to include sugar, tobacco and cotton as well. How receptive are legislators on your end to that idea?
Well, generally speaking, those kind of markets are quite politically sensitive here. There are certainly agricultural states. The senators from those states hold a lot of political clout in Congress and wouldn't be keen to see competitors coming from Africa. And also this poultry problem as well. The senators from the poultry states really feel that it's an unfair situation at the moment. So there is a sense that they want to protect the US market in agricultural products. But also one of the big things is that the regulations, the safety standards here in America generally are much higher than in Africa, and that has been one of the big barriers. Simply the products don't meet the criteria for import into the US. So several reasons why that hasn't happened as much, but many analysts I've spoken to say that for AGOA to really be worthwhile, it does need to be further expanded into the agricultural sector.
Indeed. We'll leave it there for the time being with that discussion on phytosanitary standards. That's Kate Fisher keeping tabs on developments, of course, in Washington. Let's move on to the ongoing political unrest in Burundi. It's been a very hectic 48 hours. It's also been a day characterized by explosions and gunfire in the capital, Bujumbura, amidst claims and counterclaims over the success of a coup announced on Tuesday. President Pierre Nkurunziza's whereabouts also remain unknown for now. Miriam Bemard in London spoke to the principal Africa analyst, Robert Bessling, who says escalating fighting is posing quite a big risk to investors in the East African nation.
Robert, thank you very much for joining us. Now, as we see tensions still very much high in Burundi, of course, the president has been removed. We are seeing a coup. Was this expected?
I think, first of all, to clear up what's going on at the moment, we haven't seen a successful coup yet. So far, it's an attempted coup, which is still right now in the process of playing out. The president, his whereabouts are unknown. He was out of the country in Tanzania. There are reports he was flying back to Burundi, but the airport has been shut. But to answer your question, yes, this was expected. This is in the lead up to very disputed elections coming up on the 26th of June, where President Nkurunziza was trying to run for a third term, which his own party and various people in the military and the opposition parties have claimed this would be unconstitutional, or in fact violate the peace agreement that was signed in 2006. And yesterday really was the most opportune time for this coup to take place, with President Nkurunziza outside of the country. And this possibly would have been the last time he would have had to leave the country before these elections a month away from now. So absolutely, certainly, we've been advising our clients over the last few weeks and months that this was certainly expected.
And of course, one of the issues is, what are some of the risks to the region now?
Well, first of all, it's a risk of fighting, heavy fighting within the capital, where it may spread, especially to the southern and western regions, where there are internally displaced people's camps. And then within the region, it may spill over, where various ethnic Hutu rebel groups may be re-invited back into Burundi, and with refugee camps being placed on the Tanzanian side of the border and the DRC side of the border, this could all spill over very easily. So far, the violence has actually been quite localized and hasn't spread beyond the capital. So many investors have not been that worried. But of course, with the fighting going on right now in the capital, many investors will be alert and be looking at a potential return to civil war by Burundi.
And so whether or not it can be contained is one aspect of it, but the other is, what about international help? Is this something that the international community needs to step into and help?
If they need to, something that can be argued, there is certainly a possibility for them to step in. Rwanda and Tanzania both have already mobilized troops and made contingency plans to step in the conflict in Burundi. There is also the United Nations Force Intervention Brigade right on the DRC side of the border, which could potentially be mobilized as well with a UN offensive mandate, the only UN mission in the world with an actual offensive mandate. And there is, of course, the reaction which we've seen so far from the African Union, where they've condemned the coup, and there's a potential for the African Union also to step in. But this takes a long period of time and would need political approval at the highest level, i.e. UN Security Council, and look for funding as well. So for the moment, we're unlikely to see an immediate unilateral intervention in Burundi.
Some interesting thoughts there, of course, on one of Africa's smaller countries. Over to Zimbabwe now. Parliament has assented to a controversial bill over there, which effectively transfers the central bank's $1.3 billion debt from its books to those of the government. Now, there had been fairly stiff opposition to the debt assumption bill, which will add to the country's already high domestic debt pile. Farai Makutuya has more.
At the height of the economic meltdown, the Reserve Bank of Zimbabwe became a jack of all trades, buying agricultural inputs, importing fuel and foodstuffs, and paying to keep the country going. They were extraordinary measures in response to extraordinary circumstances, but they were made at a huge cost. A debt running up to $1.3 billion was accrued up to 2008. Now, a bill allowing the government to take this over has sailed through the country's parliament despite resistance met during public consultations.
The message was clear that the idea was not good. The bill had negative implications, especially on the taxpayer who is currently being overburdened.
But its supporters argue the Reserve Bank can now start on a clean slate.
What the debt assumption bill does is therefore to confirm the role of the central bank, which is the lender of last resort, a regulator to financial markets, and managing the internal and external prices within Zimbabwe. So it now confines the central bank to its traditional and acceptable role.
Critics want an audit to ascertain the beneficiaries of the funds.
After that, we are going to recommend that those who benefited privately, they have to pay back their debt. But probably if there is any portion which benefited the public, then that would be okay with us. But also we recommend that the RBC consider selling some of its non-core assets in order to settle that portion which was for the public good.
Zimbabwe has an $8 billion national debt hanging around its neck like a noose. Piling on further obligations will tighten the knot and could suffocate the economy.
It clears the balance sheet of the central bank, but also we now need to address a new phenomenon, which is an increase in the domestic debt stock of government. And I think this is something that government needs to do in terms of restructuring, not just current debt, but the new debt that it assumes from the central bank.
Various measures to contain expenditures have been proposed and could be stepped up with the addition of another $1 billion plus to the country's debt bill. What it all translates to is tighter austerity measures, but the trade-off government is hoping for is restoration of confidence in the financial sector, which will in turn attract investment. Farai Makutuya, CCTV, Harare, Zimbabwe.
Quick run through markets here for you. It's another day of dismal numbers across the board. Relatively tame days in trading in South Africa and in Kenya. Markets there essentially just treading water. Egypt, however, completely different story. A correction of over 200 basis points came through in trading today. Coming up next, we'll tell you why South Africa's government is yet again concerned about planned retrenchment in mine workers. And 2 months after Kenya shut down Somali cash remittance businesses, we'll be exploring the impact this has had on businesses and families. Africa is on the move. It's home to 7 of the world's 10 fastest growing economies. We help you make sense of the fast-changing African business landscape. We take you where the business is happening.
Global Business, weekdays at this time on CCTV Africa.
This report by the African Green Revolution Alliance says climate change will slash food output. Within the next 30 years, the number of malnourished people in sub-Saharan Africa could jump nearly 40%.
Welcome back to the program. You're watching Global Business Africa. Now, the South African mining sector is just about to enter some fairly strained and highly tense wage negotiations in the gold sector. And it appears that the country's Minister of Natural or Mineral Resources, rather, is concerned about potential retrenchment. Earlier this week, Lonmin announced that it may have to cut about 3,500 jobs. The minister's called an urgent meeting with industry players to address the matter. The minister will also be watching developments in the gold sector. And the minister will be expecting mining firms to be more transparent about their financial positions.
We are interested in what is happening because we are the regulator of this industry. So indirectly, we do talk to the mining houses, we're talking to the unions, and we are indirectly advising that we want to have a much transparent process, particularly from the side of the industry, that they open up the books and enable the interlocutors, the unions, to have a good picture of what is happening in the environment globally and also here in the country.
On to some company news now. Kenya's Equity Group Holdings is betting on Ethiopia's entry to the World Trade Organization later this year to provide it with an opportunity to expand. The group's chief executive, James Mwangi, reckons at the WTO meeting later this year in Africa, at that meeting, Ethiopia may be persuaded to sign up to the organization. Now, that essentially will open up the Horn of Africa nation to a lot more foreign investment. Ethiopia is among 10 new markets Equity Group is targeting in a 5-year expansion plan. The country locked out Kenyan banks in November 2012 so as to encourage domestic investment in the industry. The 10th WTO Ministerial Conference will be held in the Kenyan capital of Nairobi in December this year. Now, it's been about 2 months since Kenya's government unilaterally closed remittance accounts to Somalia over suspicions of financing terrorism. Now, given the fact that Somalia's economy is heavily dependent on remittances, CCTV's Mohammed Hirmonge looks at how life has been without the hawalas.
Shamso Abdullahi didn't receive cash from her husband in Kenya. She has to borrow again this month. For years, she received $200 every end of the month. The money goes towards food, water and tuition. Not anymore. The hawalas have been suspended in Kenya where her husband works.
There is nothing to do here to earn a living, not even street cleaning. We don't know what to do. Everything you do in the city, every step you take, you need money. And now our only source of income has been cut off. That means survival would be very hard.
If the hawalas remain closed, Shamsa and her family could face more problems.
We are feeling the impact already, and it's only 2 months or even less. Many people in Somalia only rely on remittances from kin abroad. If there are ways possible, then authorities should negotiate to reopen the hawalas. That's how we survive.
In a country where statistics show nearly 2/3 of the population are out of work, the remittances are key to survival. And it's not only the families that have been affected by the closure of the remittance agencies. Local NGOs and humanitarian firms too have not received their funds from donors.
The NGOs also use the hawalas as an efficient way to receive support and funding, to facilitate projects and also pay staff. I know of a local NGO that supports thousands of students, which could not go ahead with its operations. So its impacts are gross.
Not many people in Somalia have jobs or bank accounts. Money from relatives overseas is the only way they can pay for basic needs. $1.3 billion, that's the amount of money sent from abroad through the hawalas every year. It's more than any foreign assistance or overseas direct investment into Somalia. And if the hawalas remain closed or suspended, support worth $1.3 billion is at stake. But even worse, there are fears the remittance business might go underground, making it even tougher for many people to support their families. Mohammed Hirmoge, CCTV, Mogadishu.
And of course, yesterday we did explore the move into online digital transactions as well. Quick run through commodity prices here for you. 66.82, that's the operative number that we're looking at on oil prices. However, we are also keeping a very close eye on the June 5th meeting of OPEC. What exactly will come through from that should be a fairly interesting decision coming through from members of that cartel. Now, for decades, children and adults alike have derived quite a bit of pleasure from Legos. Now they're being key to South African art. We'll tell you why shortly.
Africa is not one country.
And Africa is not one story.
But as Africans, we do share one belief.
What more offensive in a
that whatever the challenge, we will overcome.
CCTV Africa brings you unrivaled coverage.
From the fight against Ebola to the fight for greater freedom.
From the figures seeking your vote to the figures shaping your economy.
This is Guy Henderson reporting from the jungles of East.
And all the reasons to celebrate the diversity of life on this great continent.
Welcome back to the program. Let's talk about Lego. These little bricks have been around for almost 70 years now. They brought joy to children around the world for decades and pain to adults who've been unfortunate enough to step on them. Now, the Lego Group was founded back in 1932. It won the prestigious Toy of the Century award twice. And so far, Lego toys are still fun, educational, challenging, not just for kids, but for adults as well. Now, these little bricks are also being used to create art in South Africa. Sumitra Naidu explains why.
The Art of the Brick Lego exhibition is a world where art meets passion. For most adults, Legos are plastic building blocks that keep their children busy for hours. But Lego artist Nathan Sawaya has made a career out of creating sculptures from these little bricks.
Nathan was a commercial lawyer in New York and had grown up loving Lego and was passionate about Lego, and decided when he went to university that he studied law, but he carried on building with Lego, and then a number of years ago decided he was going to follow his passion for art and created artworks out of Lego, as if one would make out of clay.
It's all right. Here comes the sun. Here comes the sun.
Sawaya's pieces are carefully crafted, one plastic brick at a time. Each sculpture created from Sawaya's own emotional and life experiences. His most renowned piece is known as Yellow Man.
Yellow Man is his most iconic work, and it's the one that we all recognize as Nathan Sawaya. Yes, you're indeed correct. It has been used on a Lady Gaga music video, but it has been used in many other mediums, and it has just become iconic of this specific exhibition.
Apart from just building for fun, Sawaya uses his sculptures to tell of raw human emotion.
The exhibition includes impressions of famous Italian artworks such as David and the Mona Lisa. At the end, a 7-meter-long Tyrannosaurus Rex skeleton made from more than 80,000 Lego bricks bids you farewell.
I enjoyed it a lot. It was very nice here. I enjoyed lots of the Lego stuff. My favorite Lego piece, like figurine action, was the dinosaur, because I do like lots of dinosaurs.
It's amazing to see what you can do out of Lego. Okay, it's inspirational for the kids. To see someone do this with this toy does show you that there are no limits to what you can do.
The Lego exhibition has been running for several years now and has been rated among the top 10 in the world. If ever you thought Lego was just for children, think again. But what would Lego be without its biggest fans? Sumitra Naidu, CCTV, Johannesburg.
Biggest fans indeed. Quick run through currencies here for you. Not much to talk about on this particular front. The South African rand showing a bit of a comeback here, 1180 being the relevant number, back from, of course, its levels of about 12 or so to the dollar that we saw earlier on in the month. The Kenyan shilling also behaving quite a bit. If you use interbank rate as a proxy, liquidity, of course, has improved quite a bit. It was around 10% earlier in the month, but now there's a bit more cash coming through from government, so it's down to around the mid-9s or so. Now, here's what we're working on for tomorrow's program. We'll be looking at the removal of subsidies in Nigeria. This does continue to spark quite a bit of debate in the country, even after it was announced that economic growth slowed down in 2014. We'll be looking at the impact of this policy change. We'll also be looking at tourist arrivals in South Africa. They're down to a record low as new visa regulations are complicating travel to the country's resort cities. So then that's a sneak peek at a data-heavy bulletin for you in the next 24 hours. But that's it for this edition of the program. As always, we welcome your feedback on what we do around here. Global Business Africa at cctv.com is the email address for you to use. And as always, the news continues on Facebook and on Twitter. We'll see you on the interwebs. I'm Ramanyang. Thank you for watching.